Good morning. Welcome to the Cybersecurity, excuse me, I'm going to start that over. Good morning. Welcome to the Technology Influencers podcast. I'm here with Erik, who's a cybersecurity expert, and he's going to talk about how to find and hold a job in cybersecurity. Erik, take it away.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on here and looking forward to the conversation we're going to have. And so a little bit of background on me, just to give the audience some idea. We're talking about this at all, right? I've been in IT for more than 30 years, from starting my own companies to working for consulting to working for companies directly. And in the middle there, decided to add a legal degree as a different career path. And it didn't turn out to be a legal career path, but it did turn out to be compliance, and compliance leads to cybersecurity, because PCI, HIPAA, all these different compliance standards also have a cybersecurity component, right? Because are we protecting the data for a compliance reason? Yes. How are we protecting the data? What does it mean to have encryption? All those sort of things become cybersecurity. And so the blending of those two together really did set me up for where I am today, which is that blended role of technologist, compliance, and cybersecurity. And so, I think that's a little bit of a unique path to get there, and certainly not the one I would recommend unless you really want to go to law school. It's not on the checklist of must-dos for cybersecurity, but it is something that can help you if that is your combination. So I guess, Richard, we were talking a little bit in a previous conversation about how to get to a cybersecurity role, right? So
that was my next question. Is we have a lot of our audience is beginners. They're in school, or they're changing careers because of the various things going on in the economy. Cybersecurity looks like a good one to go to. There's a lot of talk about it. So how would a person who has maybe done some certs or done a couple courses or wants to get started?
Yep. Yeah, and I think this is the answer that us legal folks hate to say to them, but because it's not that direct answer that everybody wants to hear, but it's a little bit of it depends. And the reason it depends is, what is your background? What are those certs that you have? And then who do you know, and what opportunities are available? Because everybody wants a remote job, right? That's a very popular thing. Not all cybersecurity jobs are remote. And so a little bit of it's going to be geographical. That's just the nature of it. But also, and I've seen this conversation happening a lot on LinkedIn and other networks. The entry-level positions are starting to get harder to get into, or they're expecting you to have experience for entry level, which is always confusing. And so how do you start to build any level of experience? Because having a certification is a good thing. It's not necessary. Having a technical background is a good thing. It's also not necessary. We have people going into security without, they don't have a computer science degree, for example. I don't have a computer science degree. And so how do you find that path in? I think is going to be the thing that you're going to have to look at from an individual perspective, and kind of tune and tailor that. And so what I really mean is, obviously apply for jobs. That's a starting point. But what are the right jobs for the things that you want to grow into? So being an analyst in a security operations center, a SOC, is a entry level or junior level position. But there's also a limitation on how many of those roles are. Another thing to think about is small and medium businesses are today struggling with cybersecurity more than some of the large enterprises, because the risk is the same to them, but they can't afford the fancy security. They can't afford their own SOC, right? And are they going to an outsourced provider, or how are they handling that? It can be something to think about. Is, are there groups that you can work with if you have a couple of different skills, if you have a couple of different disciplines that maybe you're pivoting from, where your 80% could be that, and then that 20% could be helping them establish a better security posture, security baseline, so that you are practicing those security skills in a real world environment with real risks that are happening. and go from there.
Sounds good. So you do a lot of networking on LinkedIn, and it seems to me that a prerequisite to that, of course, is having a pretty good LinkedIn profile that's optimized, posting regularly, commenting, connecting with the right people. How do you connect with the right people?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
that is a great question. And so I think it's twofold, especially if we're talking on LinkedIn, right? You mentioned profile, posting, and commenting, right? So I'm going to say take those first two and put them a little bit lower on your list. If you're just focused on networking, you have to have them because you want to have some sort of, if I come back and look at your profile, some substance there. But kind of that first thing, or the effective thing, I guess is a better way to say it, is find the people who are talking on LinkedIn, right? Who are active and are talking about the things that are of interest to you. So if you're trying to get into cybersecurity, find the people that are out there that are talking about cybersecurity. There's a bunch of us, so you won't have any shortage finding them. Find groups that they're in, find that where they're talking about it, and then start paying attention to what they're writing, right? And how they're talking about cybersecurity. But more importantly, and you mentioned this, Richard, start commenting on their posts. Start engaging them with a conversation in the public space. Don't just send them a direct message, because a lot of folks get so many of those that they really can't look at them or turn through them. But what they do see is when you have something interesting to say on their post, they do see that, and it is something that they will pay attention to. And now your name is associated with that thought and that comment, and so you can start to create that connection. So, there's a lot of social events where you can build up a lot of connections. I'm not saying don't do that, because that's a great way to just broaden your network and find a lot of interesting people. But for the purpose of growing your cybersecurity, find the people who are talking about what you want to talk about. Also find the people who are in the industry but maybe not as active. Click the follow button, right? You can click the connect button. It'll follow them and they might connect back to you. But if you're worried about your connection limits and all those things, those restrictions, just click follow. Get to them, see what they're talking about, and see if they are somebody that you want to engage with further. But then engage with the comments. Circling back though to your point about the profile, right? You still need to have that profile good, because once you start engaging with them, they're going to see your tagline on that post. So if that tagline is not catchy and interesting, you've already kind of lost the first glance. And then of course they do click through to see who you are and what you're about. A good profile is going to help kind of close that and say, I do want to reciprocate. I do want to click that connect button or the follow back. So I think all of those are important, but to really be effective at the networking, it is the commenting side that will really connect you with people and help you actually get to know them and them get to know you. Does that make sense?
Yes, and not only that, when you comment, you should always follow up. So if somebody's going to comment on it saying, well, this is stupid, or this is good, you have a point, or whatever they say, you can follow up and say more about it. You can defend yourself, you can elaborate, and that starts helping you find other people who are active, who not necessarily posting, because posting can be hard, coming up with articles and things, but definitely. Commenting is probably the easiest thing. One thing I want to point out is liking doesn't do that much.
I don't.
And
unless only 3 people like it.
Yeah, it's like big deal. And for the algorithm, it doesn't do that much. But you when somebody posts, you help them a lot by commenting. You actually help them, and you help yourself.
Right. Yeah. So it's a little bit of you're scratching their back, right? And they can scratch your back, because yes, you are helping them be promoted in LinkedIn, but more important, you're helping yourself be promoted, because your comment is on their post in front of their network. So I know, Richard, you've got quite a follower base, right? So if you've posted something and I comment on it, that's not just visible to my network. It's actually visible to my network, but it becomes visible to your network too. And so it's like twice or 10 times, depending on the person you're commenting on, follower. So it's a very, let's call it cheap and easy way to get your name in front of a whole bunch of people often, right, I'll see a great post, I'll comment on it, and then the conversation that spawns off that is kind of its own thing, its own little conversation that may relate back to the original post, but may not. And so that power of connection is real and very much present if you follow that approach.
Yep. The repost is also powerful because it takes that post and puts it in your feed, but with all of those comments and things on it. So that actually drags people over to your feed. So you really need to, the good place to start is commenting. And intelligent comments, don't just put, I acknowledge this, or done, good, or something. Put something useful there, or don't put anything at all, because you want to be seen as somebody who is contributing to the group, not just somebody who's clicking the button.
Yeah, no, exactly. Sometimes there's a great post and you want to say great post, but it's really not that helpful for you, for the original poster. So if it is a great post, and it's kind of cool, LinkedIn will actually prompt you if you click the like button, it'll say, tell them why you like it. Or if you click the funny button, I guess, the laugh reaction, it'll say, tell them what do you find funny. That's what you should do, right? Your comment should tell the first poster why you thought it was a great post, not just great post, exclamation point, and I'm done. Even better though, add your own thoughts to that. So if they're talking about password security and you're like, this is interesting, there's a thing I also know about password security, obviously not quite in those words, but then you're actually building on the conversation as well.
Yep. But you do want to use some caution there, some cautionary notes. Use humor with caution. Different cultures have different things on humor, and humor doesn't translate well over the internet.
Right.
Is one. Number two is try and keep it positive as you can. If you don't have anything, my mom used to say, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. And that holds triply true on LinkedIn, because those comments stick around, and sometimes they're judged based just on what you commented and not on what you were commenting on. And you start becoming seen as a jerk, and you don't want that.
Yeah. And I think that's, you see it over and over if you're on LinkedIn frequently enough, how positive a network, how optimistic of a network LinkedIn is compared to other social networks, which are both positive and negative, right? They're kind of free-for-alls. Big difference is because that's your real name next to all those comments, next to all those posts. It's not just your Twitter handle that may or may not have any way to tie back to you, where you're free to say what you want, or Reddit or wherever we see more. To your point, like positive, the other networks where you can be a little bit more anonymous, people do tend to go a little bit different. So LinkedIn, hopefully that's your real name. If not, then we got different problems to talk about. And so you're being tied to those words.
Exactly. Something important about social media is it sticks around forever, as you probably know from people who have lost their jobs because of posts they made 10 years ago. Yeah. Which is, whatever you think of that, is they made those posts and many years later. So you have to be kind of cautious to present yourself in a good light. We'd like to call it, you brand yourself. Yeah, it is. And you might actually talk a little bit about that. How do you brand yourself? So that's
a great topic. And obviously you'll find tons of personal branding experts on LinkedIn who would love to talk to you about their approach. And if they resonate with you, then absolutely it's a good thing to think about. But it's what you want to be seen as, what you want to be known for, that your personal brand. A colleague of mine just sent me an article recently about personal brand and marketing, right? Because this is what personal brand is. It's marketing. It's the message. When people see Richard's name, they're like, this is what Richard stands for. When they see Erik's name, this is what Erik stands for. And so how do you be consistent in your posting so that you're not, if you're off brand, it's obvious and why you're off brand, because every so often I posted about something I cooked one night, right? That's kind of off brand for me, but it's still on brand for me, who I am as a person. So I do talk a lot about cybersecurity, but I also talk a lot about careers and paths and how to get into cybersecurity. So it's in my case, a kind of dual-edged brand, but that's okay because it's consistent with itself. And even when I talk about what I cooked for dinner, it's true to me. It's me. Authentic, right, is the word that we like to use when we're talking about your personal brand. If you are not authentic as you promote yourself on LinkedIn, it may not be obvious at first, but it will become obvious to people who are following you, who are paying attention, that something doesn't seem right. Something like, how can this kind of posting be true when also I see this type of commenting on the other feeds, right? And so that inconsistency, that lack of authenticity will catch up with you.
Yeah, it's good to mix in a few not too personal things. I mean, we don't want to know all the personal details, but like you say, what you cooked for dinner because you made it for yourself from scratch and you were proud of it. That's a cool thing. Or your vacation, a couple of notes about that. I see that occasionally, but we probably don't need to know all the details of how you collapsed at your funeral or the heart attack you just had. Maybe that could be appropriate, but but again, we also don't want to know about the infight you're having at work and how everybody's evil in your current office or something. Avoid that kind of stuff. Gossip, office gossip.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a good point, right? Because there's absolutely a fine line. And if there are people who are comfortable on LinkedIn talking about the kind of the hard parts of their life, they should, right? I don't think there's anything wrong. Like you said, if you want to talk about the heart attack you had, if there's a reason for that message, maybe it's awareness, maybe it's just, you want to make sure people know that you're okay, right? I think that's okay. Obviously, if you're using it to gain false sympathy or think that's a different problem, right? But yes, if you're there to gossip about your work, if you're there to talk bad about people or even the company you're at, remember that company is watching. And so there's that really fine line of how do I be authentic? How do I be honest, but also not get fired for what I post on LinkedIn? Because if we're not self-employed, that is still the hypothetical risk that we're all taking when we put ourselves out there. And it's like, if you're not at least aligned with your company's kind of principles as well, and those start diverging, you probably are going to hit some issues. But that thing, again, maybe you're ready for that. And maybe, more importantly, where I'm headed with this, it's probably not a company that you should be working for long term anyway, right? If you feel like bad mouthing and gossiping about it, or that it doesn't align with your own kind of goals. So this is not the quarter in the year for people to be overly looking for new work, because a lot of people are laid off and looking, but as that shifts, right, think about that. If that company doesn't support your brand on LinkedIn, then you might have a different company in your future.
Yes, and that comes down to reputation management. Those companies many companies run software that actually scans all social media, or at least the big ones, for things about them. And that's called reputation management. And if you're posting on Facebook bad things about the company you're working for, or the company you used to work for or something, it'll probably get picked up. And that you could get slammed by the company and other people will see it. And if I'm a hiring manager and I see you slamming your old company, I'm probably not going to hire you.
Right. Yeah.
Because you're talking bad about them. I mean, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say it at all. And that's a good rule to follow on the internet.
It is, yeah. And there's definitely, I think that's the safe rule, right? And especially if your goal is to grow and to find new opportunities, is the best rule. I will say there's people who are willing to stand for a cause, and that could be admirable, but I think they also have accepted the risk that comes with, right?
Of course.
And so that's if that's you, if that's your brand, go for it, but know that there's a risk associated with it. Because I don't think that's the same as bad mouthing, right? That's highlighting an issue that needs to be talked about.
There is a place for whistleblowers, and that's something that's important that we have in a free society, but there is risk associated with that. I mean, are you ever going to be hired again? Maybe you will.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. it's funny that you talk about the reputation scanning that the companies will do. Years ago, I actually worked for a company, and that's what their entire business was. This is Twitter was brand new, so we were investigating how to do this on Twitter, but it's more on the message boards that used to be out on the internet. And absolutely, we were crawling those message boards, gathering that data, and then doing some automated and some manual analytics to see what people were talking about for brands, for if a new game launched or a new music album launched. What were people talking about? What was that reputation? But it is something that obviously, like you said, a large company can do internally, or there's still lots of these companies who will do that research for the big names to see what are people saying about you. And then the good and the bad are the ones that rise to the top. All the middle stuff we ignore from a data perspective, but those bad comments are going to get detected and put in a report somewhere.
And sometimes they'll put a little comment, it'll automatically add a comment to your comment saying call customer support, for example. I've seen that a lot.
Yes.
And
Right.
sometimes it won't. And sometimes if you're an employee, you might get a call from a lawyer.
Yes.
Cease and desist order. I've known that to happen. Those are uncomfortable. It's not the end of the world. But
Right.
the point is that you're trying to establish a positive brand about yourself. That actually is the best way to find a job, because going in the front door, which is sending your resume out to 50,000 companies like a lot of people do,
Yeah.
those get filtered and they get in a big pile. I put out a job for a DBA a while ago, back in my old job, and
Right.
I got over 700 resumes in a stack, and I had to hire them within a week. You think I read 700 resumes?
No.
No, I was looking for like, okay, this gone. Okay, this looks good, but the back door, which is the networking door, getting a reference from somebody else,
Yes.
that is the key to getting a job quickly. Build that network, and then maybe you build a rapport with Erik here, and then Erik likes you, and he learns to understand where you're coming from. And he finds out you're a great pen tester,
Sure.
and you show him some of his work, and then he knows the position of somebody who needs a pen tester. Erik might refer you to that person. That's gold.
Right. Absolutely. We so Improving is IT consulting, and we do put job postings out there, and we do get resumes, but still, I think a huge percent of our hires end up being referrals, and it's partly because if you, Richard, want to work with Tom, fictional Tom, and you work for us, then we probably want fictional Tom to work for us as well, right? Because we already know you, and if you know them, it's going to elevate them above people we've got no clue what they're about. And so referral is still a powerful, about every industry, every company, but still a super powerful way to have, like you said, skip the resume stack and at least be on the top of it. Doesn't mean they don't get interviewed, doesn't mean you don't do your due diligence, but you at least have a known quantity coming into that door that if your resume alone will never get you.
In fact, I was talking to a CISO last night, doing something else, and he was telling me that he's been hired numerous times, and not one of the people who interviewed him even asked for his resume.
Right.
It's his reputation and his LinkedIn
Yep.
profile, and the way he came across in the interview. They didn't even look at his resume. They didn't care.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a great point. And, I will say, when I'm acting as a hiring manager, I do let our recruiting team screen the resume, right? If they're coming through the resume portion. For me, the resume is a conversation device. It's not a filtering device. Well, by the time it's on my desk, I'm already talking to the person. So I just need to know what to talk to them about. And if you think about the resume, it's one, how do you get through the screening? And two, how do you make a conversation device? I think it does give a little bit more sense of what you should be doing there, right? So I know you and I don't want to talk about resume advice here. That's a whole nother topic.
Oh yeah, that's a different
there's a
can of
ton
worms.
out there. But I'm just sharing from my perspective. At the time I'm looking at your resume, I'm not using it to make a filtering decision, right? So
by the time I was looking at resumes, I had my choice down to 3 people, and I was the resume was mostly irrelevant by then, and I just used it for questions like, what is this gap on your employment and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and so forth, but I was more concerned with the reputation. Who is vouching for you,
Yeah.
who referenced you, and as a ghostwriter, 70 to 80% of the jobs that come to me are referrals based from
Sure.
people who know me or have done business with me or who have heard about me and say, oh, I know this ghostwriter. He did a blog for me and it was pretty good. And
Yeah.
boom, I got another job,
Yeah.
It's same
I
way
think
in security.
it is, and it's amazing. Like, uh, you run your own business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when you run your own business, referral is critical. I did it myself for IT work, and I put it in the newspaper to get the first few leads, but then I may have run the ad twice, right? Every other customer was referred at that point. Um, Even improving today, we are, we've got offices from Canada, Mexico, 15 different cities. Still a huge percent of our business is referral. We know, we worked with the CTO of this company, and he or she is now at a different company, and he says, hey, we should bring them in, or all that word of mouth referral marketing is powerful at every level. I don't know that I'm sure there are businesses where it's more important to be on the shelf of a Home Depot or a Walmart to sell your product. But if you're in the services side of things, which, you and I are both in services, referral is still probably one of the most powerful marketing devices. And what is LinkedIn but a giant referral network, right?
Yep. And then the second piece to your brand, or big piece to your brand, is your interview skills. If
Yes.
you get to the point where you're talking to a person, like me as a ghostwriter, people come to me, they get referred, I talk to them, I nail it on the interview. I mean, I've had
Yeah.
people say I have 10 interviews lined up, and after my interview, and I'm like the first one, they're like, we're done. You're it. I'm hiring you now. And it's because I interview well. Okay. I'm typically introverted. I know it doesn't seem like it. And I used to be very, very shy, but I did a lot of things, like went to Toastmasters and learned how to speak. It's a good
Yeah.
organization. Did coaching, got somebody who sat in front of me and pretended he was the interviewer. We went back and forth, I pretended I was the interviewer, and we threw questions at each other, hard questions,
Yep.
and coached each other. And that's something you can do with anybody. You just
Yes.
have to make sure you're not attacking each other. You have to make sure you're drilling each other properly,
Correct.
and do it like business-like. But you want to have those interview skills nailed, because you can sell yourself on an interview easy if you got
Oh,
it nailed.
absolutely. Yeah. No, I have been on so many interviews. I've been with Improving for more than 10 years. So, my experience with interviews on the other side of the desk has faded a little bit, but before that, so many interviews. But also, now that I've interviewed so many people, it's a super comfortable experience, right? And like you, shy and introverted, and didn't like meeting new people. If you and networking, I'm still challenged with a group networking event where how do you work the room and meet everybody is still a skill that I'm building. But one-on-one, something that I think I'm as good as I'm ever going to be. Obviously, practice will make me better, but these coffee chats that we're having on LinkedIn are amazing for that as well, right? Because at that point, you're talking to a total stranger about something, right? So a job interview is high stress and it's highly targeted, and they're going to ask you hard questions. But you want to be comfortable just talking to a stranger first. And so the coffee chats that LinkedIn members are doing is a great way just to practice that, just having a conversation. Because, like you said, you can nail it in an interview. If you have the confidence, the comfort, if you're having fun in an interview, you are going to be so far ahead of the people who feel like they're being integrated and act like that, right? And I know that as a hiring manager in the past, when I've interviewed people, the people who sit there and just have a conversation with me about the topic are going to be so much higher than the people who you're when I'm talking to them and literally dragging information out of them. Like, tell me more about this. One word answer. Tell me more about that. One word answer. Right? It's just so.
I,
People.
I will tell you an interesting story. We're coming to the end of this interview here, but
Yeah.
this story was well, my favorite hire. His name was Ross, and his wife came in for an interview with HR. She was going to get a job with HR. So while she was interviewing, he was sitting in the lobby, and I happened to walk by, and he introduced himself. You know, he sounded like Wolfman Jack, if you know who he is, with the harsh voice and stuff. And we started talking just because he was a fun guy. And he mentioned he used to own a motorcycle shop and he sold it, and he broke his back and he had a steel plate in his head and blah, blah, blah. And he came across really well. He was really friendly and stuff. And he was like, well, you got a position open? And I'm like, no, not really. But, you know, and I kept talking to him. And I realized that I wanted him on my team because he was so good with me and so good with people. So I made a position for him and I hired him. And even though I've been gone from that company now for 9 years, he's still there. And he's been there. I think I hired him 15 years ago. And he wasn't technical. He went to DeVry and got a certifications and stuff. So I put him in place as the person who negotiates with vendors and the person who helps users with hurt feelings, you know, and who dealt with the managers and things. So he was my person who talked to people because he was so good at it and ordering things, negotiating contracts, and he loved it. And he had a job, and it was something he could do. And it was great on my team having somebody who wasn't technical necessarily, but who knew technology. And it all happened because he just came in and talked the talk, and then was able to walk the walk, of course. And I remember his words. He says, well, why don't you just take a chance on me? I tell you what, you know, if in 30 days it ain't working out, you just tell me and I'll just leave. It's fine, you know, and I'll even put that in writing and stuff. And we shook hands on it, and he's still there.
That's awesome. Yeah. Amazing story. And I don't think it's unusual, honestly, right? I think there's a lot of people who found their opportunities that exact way. So.
Yeah. And that was of course a quirk, but you're at one of these networking events and you start talking to somebody and you come off impressive. That's why I highly recommend Toastmasters. That's a group. They're in most cities. They have meetings usually in the morning or in the evening, and you go to them and you learn to speak. So one week you're speaking, the next week you're critiquing somebody speaking. So it goes back and forth, and you learn all of the things you need to do, and you do different kinds of speeches. You learn how to put humor in and stuff like that. And it really makes you comfortable with people. And highly, highly, highly recommended. I think they cost, you know, somewhere around $100 a year. It's not a big fee.
Right.
And some of them are free. There's other groups that do that. But anyway, that's when you're networking, you're communicating, and the better you can communicate, the better, the easier it is for you to get in. The worse you can communicate, it's going to be harder for you to get in.
Right. No, exactly. And yeah, Toastmasters is great. I have not used them, but I know lots of people that have and speak highly of it. And for me, it's more, never had the opportunity from a scheduling perspective to do it, and probably should. And I'll tell you what I did though to get just more comfortable with it is every company I've worked for has had some sort of lunch and learn program where you pick a topic and typically work related and you present them. And so it's super safe environment, right? It's your coworkers, probably some of your friends, and hopefully some people will give you some constructive criticism as well. But if nothing else, they'll just get you comfortable, and that way you can gradually increase your audience, right? To include strangers, to include larger and larger groups. And so that's really what helped me. Also, the idea of a remote talking kind of made me more comfortable as well. It's like, I'm talking to a camera right now and Richard voice, right?
Exactly.
And
exactly.
So LinkedIn live events are not nearly as scary, right? Because it's just a camera that I'm talking to.
Yep. Even though you might be talking to 100,000 people.
Exactly. Eventually, yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I've done successfully is library reading groups, and there's all kinds of organizations in the area where you can get and talk, and I've given speeches at libraries. It used to be where you couldn't get me on stage to save my life. I mean, I won an award and they couldn't get me on stage to accept it.
Right.
And now I'm like, give me 50,000 people. I'm happy to talk. Bright
awesome.
lights and all. It's funny how that changes over life, because you realize you're not going to die if you're on stage. Even if you blow it, you're not going to die.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, and that's most people in that audience are as scared or more scared than you are on stage. So
yeah, and if you blow it, you make it into a joke, and people laugh, and you pretend like you intended to do that.
exactly. Yeah.
You can use techniques like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
these are all ways, and I have to say that that language can be a barrier, language barriers, but I found when I was hiring for the last company I was working for that it was easy to overcome because they were good speakers, even though they had a rough time. Like I had a Russian, it was hard to understand him sometimes, but he
Sure.
communicated so well that it didn't matter.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, fine, I'll hire a Russian. It's totally fine,
Yeah.
and it worked out well because I was kind of proud I had one of the most diverse staffs at Trader Joe's because I mean, I like diverse staffs because it gives me different viewpoints.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I had from all over the world. I had somebody from Cameroon, somebody from Cuba, and got these. Somebody would raise their hand in a meeting and say something like blah 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 blah. And I'm like, I never thought of that before, and
Yeah.
it's
So many
because he had an IT department in Cameroon and learned something totally different than I did, in a different way, and it was fascinating. I learned a lot from that experience about that. So, I mean, language barriers, they're there.
yes.
There's a lot of people I see on LinkedIn who are immigrants, and that's fine. Just don't worry about it. If you need to take courses or coach with somebody to help overcome that, then do that. But don't be overly concerned about it. It's not going to stop you.
Yeah. No, and not just, you said immigrants, but LinkedIn is a worldwide network, and so many when I
Oh, of
post, I will
course,
see
of course.
people from I've posted a couple of times. I've had people from every continent to Antarctica, right, respond to posts before, and so I'm still trying to get Antarctica. Hopefully someday somebody will, see it. But they got more important things to think about than LinkedIn and Antarctica.
I bet you haven't gotten anybody from Kazakhstan yet, though.
Probably not. No, I'm just at the continent level, not every country. So
I got a LinkedIn. I used to do LinkedIn profile optimizations. I still do,
yeah,
and I had one in Kazakhstan, and that was very interesting.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah, we had a couple offline meetings about life in Kazakhstan and stuff because I was so fascinated. And he wanted to know about America and
right.
and totally different mindset. More of a communist style upbringing, and it's interesting.
Yeah, it's true.
But I think I'll end this on it's important to understand whether you're going for cybersecurity or some other field, because we kind of wandered around into hiring.
Yeah.
It's a world wide web, as you pointed out. It's the world. So if you're scared of finding a job, you've got how many hundreds of millions of companies out there that are looking for people, millions at least, tens of millions, just in the United States, and you've got the entire world. I've had clients all over the world.
Yep.
And one of my books was from a guy in France, and another one was Singapore, and another one from China, Taiwan, and
yeah,
it's like don't be. I mean, obviously there's intimidation and all that. The time zones can be tough, but it's a remote world in many ways. Go out there and find it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, the whole world is available to us through the social media, through the internet, through LinkedIn. So
yeah, it's a different world.
Yeah.
Any closing words to our audience?
I think to your point, we started on cybersecurity, but then we moved into hiring in general, and I think that's fine because security is a profession like all the others, right? And so the same rules apply. Networking, having good connections, having a good LinkedIn profile, having all those rules are going to apply to you whether it's cybersecurity or not. It makes it be more relevant to cybersecurity right now because there's a lot of movement around that, a lot of people trying to be seen, but that's kind of true of all the professions, I think. So yeah, lean in and figure out how to leverage it, reach out to people, connect with folks like myself, like Richard. We're here. I'll speak for myself, Richard. I'm here to help, and I think you are too. And so, yeah, take advantage of what's out there.
Yes, and thank you very much for being here. I am
Thank
Richard
you.
Lowe. This is the Technology Influencers Podcast. I'm a ghostwriter and I write books and blogs for people. And I also optimize LinkedIn profiles and I do career coaching. So if you need some help, you can approach me and we can work something out and I can help in some way or other, even with just a few lines of advice here and there. But as you said, one of my goals in life is to help people that's why I chose ghostwriting. I mean, I like writing and I like to help people, and a book helps somebody, or blogs helps a company, or writing a LinkedIn profile certainly helps a person. So, and that's the end of that.